Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Unravel Your Mind. We're here to help transform relationships to love and life. I love all of your questions. I love all of the comments. And we're going to dive deep and jump right in today. There are several pre-submitted questions, but I want to say that if you have anything that comes up, if you're watching this live, please enter it in the chat. I'll be happy to answer the questions. And if you're watching it on replay, please put your questions in the chat. I'll either answer it in the chat, or I'll come back next week at 11:11 and put it on my list of questions to answer. So I love this discussion. The first one is a little bit of a challenge in the sense that it's a deep topic, but I'm going to make it as simple as I know it to be. And the first question is, let me get over to my little question board here. What do you think enlightenment means? So that one I love, because I think there's probably lots of ways that people would answer it, but it's, to me, very simple, that it's living in consciousness. And then someone might say, well, what do you mean? Aren't we all conscious? Because if we're not conscious, then we're, asleep or knocked out. And so it's all about that phrase of being here now and being very conscious about our experience in each moment. Because what happens, we just don't even realize this, is that our mind is constantly online, thinking about something in the future, thinking about something in the past, thinking. I like this, I don't like that. And so consciousness is having the experience of being in the energy of everything, and really having the experience of being in, I'm going to say oneness, but being in the moment, where we're really present, where we're not being driven by the mind. So it's a somewhat easy way to explain it, and people take lifetimes to actually achieve this level of consciousness where we are really, really present with all that is. So while we can simplify it, I do recognize that it can be a very challenging thing, and it's an inward journey that we're all on. People like Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Allah, they've all done a great job being examples in many ways of what this state of consciousness is in human body, walking around on the earth plane. It's not about just being in an ashram and meditating. It's that meditative state every moment that we are in this life, and that we are experiencing all that life has to offer. So that's how I would define enlightenment, when you're actually at this stage where you're having these experiences with everyone and everything that are just from a place of curiosity and beauty. And it doesn't mean that we don't have emotions, that we don't have a reaction to our environment or to our situation. But it means that we come back to a blissfully neutral state. We come back to experiencing an emotion and letting it flow through us, being conscious in that moment, not having to associate it with a thought form or a pattern or a trauma or a memory, and putting it through our lens, which is what we do. And there's nothing wrong with that either. So that's how I would answer what enlightenment means. Okay, so I guess the other thing, I did make a note here in advance about enlightenment, and a lot of times we learn how to be an individual person through our ego minds when we're born into this world. And so we can be very conscious coming in, and then we learn from our environment, and sometimes it's survival techniques. We cry because we're hungry and we need food. And then we start to learn what our sense of self is and how we fit into this world. And that's where we're creating our own ego mind. And the ego mind is what we're always working with to put into its rightful place in the back seat, so that the soul can drive, and that we can be in this higher state of consciousness and awareness and experience with life itself. So I just wanted to add that. All right, so question number 2, and I'm looking here at the chat to see what we've got. Question 2, people talk about being in their king and queen energy. What do you think this means in spiritual ascension, not traditional royalty definitions. Yeah, I'm glad that there's that disclaimer on there, because talking about king and queen energy is not in the truest sense of royalty or in any way that we see that in our world today. Um, I believe that king and queen energy can be a really interesting label, I guess you'd say, to put on something. But there's still constructs of the ego mind. There's still identifiers. They're still trying to say that you are something. And at our highest state of consciousness, we are whole and perfect and connected to source and having this experience. And calling someone or ourselves a king or a queen can feel really empowering. So I don't want to take that away from it, but it's still trying to say that there's something separate about us, something more special about us, something more powerful about us and individually. And so I think that's where we get a little bit caught up in these definitions and these archetypes, because that's what they are. They are archetypes. We all play out different archetypes in our life. In fact, I studied Carolyn Mace for many, many years. I loved her archetypal cards. I reference them in my book, Angels, Herpes, and Psychedelics, and how much I utilize them. And she had a theory that she believes that we play 12 primary archetypes. And I don't mean personality, it's different than that. It's an archetype, it's an energy of a type of character that has characteristics. That these are all ego definitions, but sometimes they help us to understand why we react the way that we do. And so king and queen are part of those archetypes, or part of the deck, if you will, that you could choose. Not everyone's playing out a king or queen archetypal pattern. Some people are playing out very different patterns than that. So yes, we can identify with king and queen, but in this true spiritual ascension journey, there really is no need for these labels. They're something that help the ego feel special, feel different, feel more powerful, help us, claim our own power within. But again, there's still going to be in a sense of separateness and specialness, which is not true spiritual ascension. So I like to play with them. In fact, a friend of mine gave me a little plaque that says Queen, and I love it. I think it's fun. It's iridescent. It's powerful. It doesn't necessarily mean that I associate with any elements of Queen, although I am Queen Bliss Bee on my Instagram account, and that came out of my mission of pollinating the planet with love and wanting to really just be in the fun of part of Mother Nature and being Queen Bliss Bee. So we can have these labels, we can have this fun, but just I think always recognize that there's still constructs of the mind, and it doesn't make us different or special from anyone else on this journey. So hopefully that answers this individual's question. If not, please give me a little note in the chat and I will clarify more. Okay. The third thing is, you talk a lot about psychedelics. Yes, I do. Love psychedelics in many respects, but I also have a lot of discernment around psychedelics. Who do you think is not a good candidate? Okay, well, that's an interesting question. I'm going to give the obvious. People who don't want to do them are not a good candidate for them. And I also think people who are not really interested in doing their inner work. Now, I mean, I could answer that and kind of contradict myself slightly, because I think some people fall into a psychedelic experience and have an incredible shift and an awakening. So I do not want to discount that, because I think that is great for some, that sometimes that's the catalyst, that's the awakening agent that helps them get through to the next level of their spiritual ascension. But ideally, you would want to have an intention. You would want to feel called to utilize psychedelics. I know me personally, I've wanted individuals in my life close to me to try psychedelics for various reasons, whether it was a lover or a family member, knowing that it would help them to really break through what they're struggling with. And I just want to say that I think it's always important as us fellow, I don't know if psychonaut's the right word to use, but fellow individuals who are utilizing plant-based medicines, who understand the power of plant-based medicines, to also understand the power of intention setting and the power of agreement in going into a sacred ceremony. It's not something we want to push our loved ones, or encourage them to do beyond where their own calling is. So we need to let people sit with exactly where they are and be exactly who they are, and come to psychedelics at a place that's right for them, not necessarily a place that we think is right for us and right for our relationship with them. But we can certainly offer, we can provide a sacred space, we can provide our insights and knowledge. I also put together a guide, the Psychedelics Resource Guide. It's on my website, bethbell.me /psychedelics. It lists 12 of the top things that I think are really important before going into a psychedelic ceremony or plant-based medicine ceremony. So that provides a little bit of a guide as well. But if someone's not open to it, let's not push people into this. This is not what psychedelics are about. I feel that there's a real calling that takes place. All right, let's look at the next question here. And if there's any additional questions that we have, please write them in the chat. Do you think it's better to go to a mystical place like Hawaii or Costa Rica to have an ayahuasca experience? Do you think it's better? Well, actually, I don't think it matters, to be honest. But I do think that there are some interesting dynamics that can happen in places like Hawaii and Costa Rica. So I'm not saying don't go. I'm just saying you don't have to go. The setting is the most important thing. And part of that is your mental mindset. And part of that is the setting and the location and the shaman and the individuals who are there serving. And to me, that is the most important thing, because you could be in someone's garage that is now made into a temple and a very sacred space because the person holding the ceremony has a lot of experience and an ancestral lineage that can command that space and keep that space safe for everyone involved, and also help everyone in the room transmute and move through all of the information that's coming to them. That can be an incredibly powerful experience. Whereas perhaps going to Peru and going with a shaman that you don't know, going with a shaman who's more about spiritual tourism and less about actually holding a sacred space for you, and you could have a very miserable experience with all of the entities and energies and dimensions that you enter that would not be a safe space. So there's lots of different scenarios that can take place, but you can also go to a Costa Rica or Hawaii and have just an incredible experience because of the power of the shaman and the ancestral lineage and Mother Nature being just ooh in its juiciness and finest with a jungle environment. So there could be like an incredible experience that maybe you wouldn't have in a safe space here. I think it's again goes back to really feeling into what do you feel called to do and where and with who. And those are the critical things to answer, because you really want to be in a safe place in your own mind moving in, because if you haven't already done medicine, you'll know that when you get close to doing your ceremony, well, actually when you sign up to do the ceremony, you have already pretty much started the journey, because the mind starts clicking in and the mind starts going, okay, things are going to change here. We're going to get some insight, some information. And so it's important to really sit with this decision about doing medicine. In my opinion, I know there's a lot of people that do recreational psychedelics. I'm just not as much of an advocate. I'm not an advocate for that. I think there's times when it works for people. So I recognize and honor that. Just for me personally, I highly encourage individuals to, especially in the beginning, to really be in a sacred space. So yeah, there's lots of things that Hawaii, Costa Rica, Peru, all of these places can offer very special experiences that are tantalizing to the humanness of us all, whether it's air quality or the birds or the majesty of a sacred location. So I absolutely encourage people that if you're called to go to these places, please do, but don't feel like you have to. You don't have to go and spend money or time or whatever if you're not called to do it, right? Just like I would say for any vacation you might take, you want to really feel into, is this the right place for me right now in my journey in my life? So yeah, it's up to you, but just feel into it. All right. Next question. My girlfriend and I are thinking about moving to a new home together. There's indecision and lots of discussion that's nice to work out in our minds, but it's still hard to get to a decision. Any tips on how to make a decision? Well, I'm not sure who asked the question, and so I'm not sure if my girlfriend means that it's a girlfriend or if it's a girlfriend boyfriend. But either way, I don't think it matters. So that's irrelevant, because the question is how to make a decision. And a couple of things come to mind. First of all, I would say it's always nice when you get a hell yes, like yes, like you feel it. You just like, I know this is the decision that's right for me, and then express that to the other person. So I think, really just be truthful with yourself is the first thing. Because a lot of times we want to shelter our own truth because we want to put it through the filter of what does that mean to my partner? What does that mean to my friend? What does that mean to the other person? And while I think that's really important to do, getting to your own truth first is step one. And so really dig into, was it a hell yes? Was it a hell no? Was it a maybe? And then why is it a maybe? What are the waffling points? Um, Another technique that I use a lot of times when I'm really making a decision that I feel like I'm in that analysis paralysis is I write the question down before I go to sleep. And when I wake up in the morning, first thing I say, Spirit, tell me yes or no. And I just say to myself, I'm going to do this for 5 mornings. And if, of course, if the first 3 mornings I get a definite yes or a definite no, then it's done. You don't even have to do the 5 days. But it's just a way that gets me beyond the mind. And it gets me right to, yep, what's that? What's that first thought? What's the intuitive feeling? What's the no mind response to it? So helpful for me, really cuts through and helps me to understand. And just doing it in sequence, you could just do it one day. Maybe you really then get the clarity and you're like, yeah, I don't need to do it 3 days. I like to do it the 5 days, to see for sure, because it just helps me to not go back on myself. Sometimes, we go back into that analytical mind. Well, maybe I didn't think about it enough. I have a strong mind. You might be stronger and just be able to say, yeah, got it. But write it down before you go to bed and when you wake up the next morning. The other thing that I was thinking about this, because they said moving into a new home together. So sometimes that can be difficult because there's a lot of factors about moving to a new home. I would suggest that, especially if this is a situation where it's maybe a friend, and you're not already married or you're not already cohabitating, or maybe you are cohabitating, but I would say that you should go to the property, look at the property from the mind's eye. Does it have whatever, the kitchen, the bathrooms, the lighting, all of those things that feel really important. Does it have those things? And allow your mind to feel into it, allow your body to feel into it, the energy of the room, the energy of the sunlight, the darkness, whatever it is that really speaks to you, and let it resonate. So that would be my first thing, is walk in, experience the space. The second thing I would do is I would ask, depending if you're with a realtor or if there's someone else with you, I would ask for a sacred 15 minutes, maybe 10 if you don't have 15. And if you can bring a candle, light it in the middle of the common space, and the two of you sit with the candle in between you and be in a meditative like state. Close your eyes, relax, feel into the energy of each other, because I think that that's probably one of the most important things, is honoring each other's energy. Is this the right person to be in this space with? Is this the right space for me? Is this the right space for them? But from a feeling place, right? So from a heart-centered place. And when you have a candle in front of you, it gives you a focal point, to direct your mind into a place of stillness. It brings an energy to a connection to the person you're sitting across from. And I think most importantly, that whatever decision you come up with at the end, so if it is like, yes, we're moving in together into this property, that when things get tough, you always have that candle and that flame to go back to. You can always go back into that space and go, this is the grounded place where we made this decision, and we're gonna really work through whatever issue might come up throughout the tenure of living together in that property. The other thing is if you decide, no, I don't think this is the right thing, you can always go back to that candle as a way to really leverage your clarity in that moment, so that when your mind kicks in an hour later, a week later, a month later, and says, oh, why didn't I take that place, or why didn't I do that move, that you can just go back to that centered place of knowing that you had clarity at that time. There's no need to go back and do the mind torture of woulda, shoulda, coulda. You made a very conscious decision in that moment because you sat with it. You sat in the energy of it. You sat in the energy with the other person. So I would say those are a couple of really great ways to make decisions that can help you get beyond the mind, because it's always the mind that's complicating things, and our association to past and future potential situations and energies and memories. So that's 3 really great ways to get beyond and know unequivocally, without a doubt, within you. All right, let's see what the next question is. Okay, I recently had dinner with an ex-boyfriend. We still care about each other, and the feelings are still there, even though we're just friends. Do you think it's bad to go back to a previous partner? Okay, so this is always a difficult one because there's so many elements to this question that are not written here, right? That I don't know about your relationship, and so I'm going to answer it in a broad sense, because I also don't have you on the line to ask you questions about specifics. I'm going to say that there's a couple of things. One is I'm just an absolute advocate for understanding what your soul contract is with another individual. And that doesn't always have to be romantic partners, but this question is very much about a previous boyfriend. So our soul contracts with individuals, when they're done, they're done. Sometimes we extend them longer than they need to be, but only you know when you have completed the lessons that you call that individual in to help you learn. So first of all, sit with that. Journal about that. Have I learned the lessons I need to learn, and am I ready to move on? If yes, move on. If there's still questions, there's still something there, dig deeper into what is it? Is it my mind? What element is it that I'm wanting to re-enter with this individual? Is there more growth? Is it me that only sees that there's more growth? Does the other individual see that there's more growth? Because if the other individual doesn't see the relationship as a growth opportunity for them to grow, then you're potentially in a situation where they can hold you back from your own ascension. And that's what we don't want to do in today's world. There's a lot happening here. And if you're listening to my channel, I have a really good feeling that you're a very high vibe individual who is here for the ascension and the awakening of humanity, which just means that we want to continue to expand our consciousness, our own light bodies, how we interact with ourselves and others in the world, coming from a very grounded and conscious place. And when we're with partners that are holding us back from accentuating and raising our vibration and bringing us back down to third dimensional things that are not helpful, that are just dramatic, that are potentially not part of our soul contract, that they're not going to help us get to that next ascension level. And I don't mean to say that we have to be so worried about ascension and levels and no, but we do know that we are doing the inner work and we are on our inner journey of having this experience. And if someone is pulling us back, pulling us down, making us feel less than who we know we really are, dampening our light, then those are not the people that we want to go back to. Those are not the people that we want to give our time to. They may want our time. Chances are they will want our time because they want to be at our ascension level. But if they're not willing to do their own work, you can shine the light and shine the light and shine the light. But the whole point of relationship is to give and receive. So the light has to come back. We want to be circling our light and love with another. It's not about always giving without receiving, but it is being non-attached and really allowing that beautiful exchange of giving and receiving. Not the I'm giving you, you give me. No, not that kind of energy. So I'm going to leave it at that it's really something you need to think about, and most importantly, I would say journal about, because it's not, even though I said think about it, it's not about the mind as much as it is feeling into the heart. And thinking sometimes comes from needing to actually write a word on a page, and getting our mind set in a place where we really understand what it is that we're calling that individual in for. It might be to go back in, to get more lessons, to work out a soul contract, to work out a karmic entanglement, or it might be to let it go. And there might be someone else that you work on that karmic a new karmic entanglement with. But I'm also a believer. Now I'm piling on some ideas, but I'm a believer in working through the karmic entanglements, because we bring a lot of souls back into our soul circle from one lifetime to another. And it's fun to be able to untangle these karmic entwinements we have with others. So it's a wishy-washy place to answer, because it's so individualized for each person and their contract with the other. So please feel into all of those thoughts, and you will come up with the right answer as to where. And you'll also know, if you go back, you'll know very quickly if it's really there for your ascension, or for you to make the decision to move on. Okay, let's see. I read in your book that you talk about the traumatic way you were exposed to the herpes virus. How did you overcome the fear of sharing this and printing it in a book for everyone to see? I get asked this question a lot, maybe not so directly. It's more like, why did you put herpes on the cover, after someone gets over the initial shock? And I would say there's a couple of things. I always thought I would never tell a soul unless like I was going to be intimate with them, and then I would swear them to secrecy to not share with anyone, because it was such a shameful and it was just one of those things that I don't know that I felt so much shame as I felt I didn't want to be judged. I didn't want to be judged by everyone else. And when COVID happened and I was writing my book, I just knew that it was time that we talk about virus shame. I knew that it was time that we actually blow up these ideas about, the age-old biblical stories of lepers and trying to be segregated and separate from our brothers and sisters. And it just was clear that I needed to bring this forward, and that we needed to talk about it. Humanity needs to talk about these things viruses that we want to shame people for whatever reason, or make them feel less than, or make them feel isolated, or make them feel that they're in some terrible club with the gift that keeps on giving. And we need to move beyond this. And the more we can move through the trauma and the heartbreak that's caused with something like the herpes virus, but it can be applied to so many other things. Like if you actually work through this and you build the bravery in your toolbox, it goes across so many other aspects of your life. The bravery that comes through to be able to stand up and talk about who you really are and what you're all about. I'm not saying you need to tell everybody. I'm just saying that you need to get beyond the intrepidation of feeling that you have it and that you shouldn't tell anyone, right? It's like you're still going to use discernment around who you're going to share this with. You don't have to go out there, but you don't need to be ashamed of it, and you don't need to hide under the closet about it. And you definitely don't need to not have sex with other people because of it. Look, communicate, talk about it, share it with others when you're at a place that you feel that you want to have an intimate relationship with someone. If they can't handle it and they don't want you, thank goodness you know now in the beginning upfront. So perfect. It's a great thing. It's a really great thing. You learn a lot about other people when you share these types of really sensitive, vulnerable storylines about yourself. So it's a powerful thing. I just want everyone to move beyond it and to be in their power of who they really are. All right, I'm going to continue to check the chat here just to see if there's anything else that's coming through. If you're watching this on replay, please, please, please enter your questions. I will get to them next week. I think, okay, it looks like we are good with the questions. If there's any themes or topics that you would like to hear me talk about in future episodes, I'm happy to do that as well. It doesn't always have to be a question. It could be also a question about one of the storylines in my book, Angels, Herpes, Psychedelics, Unraveling the Mind to Unveil Illusions. Actually, a lot of people don't ask me, but I know a lot of people don't know, like, what is this little guy doing here? So there's a little toad. It's the bufo toad on the front of the book. So I talk about my experience with bufo and my experience with San Pedro, which is cactus. And I get into a lot of storylines that led up to me being receptive to psychedelics, because I was actually always an absolute no-go on any drugs. So it's been a very blissful journey and an interesting one to see how I've ebbed and flowed throughout my life and become open to other modalities. And I talk a lot about tips, tools, techniques. You can also learn about them in the Awakening and Healing Handbook that I have on bethbell.me. It's a great handbook that goes through a lot of the healing modalities that I share in the book from a storytelling perspective, but it gets deeper into how to utilize them in your own life and gives you information, resources, contacts, books to read, book recommendations, lots of things that have been incredibly helpful for me on my awakening journey that I think would be really helpful for you as well if you're called to pick up the Awakening and Healing Handbook. All right. Thank you so much for being with me this week. I appreciate it. I love all of the support. I love all the questions, and I can't wait to hear what we're going to talk about next week. So please submit your questions in the comments section below. Hit subscribe, hit the bell. You'll get the next live, but it's 11:11 Pacific time every Sunday. So I look forward to seeing you again next week. And until then, namaste.